All right? So let's go with the definition. This is actually a definition for an alcohol, the technical medical definition of an alcoholic, but I modified it. The stuff in red is the stuff I added in so that we could apply it to sin, right? All right. So addiction is kind of a primary, chronic, which means it's all the time. It doesn't go away. Disease, with the genetic, which means you can inherit traits from your family and parents. Psychosocial, so the effects that our society and the standards it has for us. And we have an even more complicated one because we have America and we have Christian, right? Those two social contexts are things that affect how we view ourselves. It affects, it's got spiritual implications, and it's also influenced by your environment, the stuff around you, all right? And they influence their development. It's a chronic disease with genetic, psychosocial, spiritual, and environmental factors influencing its development and manifestations. All right? And the disease is often, it's kind of a progressive thing, which means it starts out maybe kind of like when you have, say, I don't know, like a cold, right? It starts off with just a sniffle, and then it turns into a cough, and then it turns into your nose is running and stuffy, and you can't breathe, right? So it progresses in that it gets worse and it slowly escalates. And that can be over a period of years or months or days, whatever. All right? So it's progressive and often fatal, literally in the sense of drugs or alcohol or other things like that. In the sense of sin, it's at very least spiritually fatal, right? It's fatal to our relationship with God, right? Sin is death. All right? And it's characterized by continuous or periodic, which means sometimes it goes continuously, sometimes it stops for a while and then resumes, and then stops for a while and then resumes. Impaired control over your sin of choice. And I'm going to use that term a lot. In drug and alcohol community, they use the word drug of choice, which is your favorite, the one you go to the most, the one you enjoy the most. So I'm going to use the term here, sin of choice, so that you can think of whatever sin that I struggle with the most, the one that I go to the most for comfort or when I'm not feeling good, or the one I'm weakest to, all right? Impaired control over your sin of choice, preoccupation with your sin of choice, all right, continued sinning despite adverse consequences, distortions in your thinking, and the most notable distortion to your thinking is usually denial, which would be like, I don't have a problem, it's not a problem, it's under control, right? All right, so really what we're looking at here is something that's kind of a brain disorder. It's not only... It's kind of a disease of thought, if you will. But the crazy thing is your thought can also literally change the chemistry of your brain and how your brain works. So it is biological, but it's kind of a complicated thing. It's environmental, it's genetic, it's biological, it's psychological, it's all those things at once. Because your brain has this thing called plasticity, which means it can rewire itself, it can readjust itself, it adapts to what's coming in and what's going out, what you're feeding it and what it puts out, right? And so if your brain is literally changing, or if you literally change your brain to this corrupt way of thinking, or because you're in denial and you end up kind of this way, this disease of thought, if you will, it literally will begin to manipulate your actions too, because your brain will have literally changed, all right? So like I said, even your thoughts can change that. That's how someone can get depressed. They can become depressed just on their thinking, right? Their faulty thinking, their bad thinking, their negative thinking. You can put yourself into a depression that way. Some people, it's just they have a chemical imbalance. That's one thing. But you can also put yourself into depression or be put into depression by stuff that happens around you. So you can actually change how your brain works just by the way you're thinking. And so I'm not talking about this, again, I want to make this important, just to make you feel bad or because it's just because I want us to heal from this and I want us to move on and I want us to really spend our time living for God rather than beating ourselves up and focusing all of our time on the ways in which we fail. All right, this is about healing and life-changing, about not hurting anymore, more than it's about you, feeling extra bad about yourself, because now, on top of the fact that I know that I sin all the time, now Darren's saying I'm an addict. Now Darren's saying I'm an addict, and that's not what I'm getting at. I'm not trying to heap another thing on you. I'm just trying to get you to look at your sin in a different way so that possibly you can actually be healed from it and move on, all right? So, this is a cool thing. it's got a bunch of negative thoughts and emotions and things that happen, negative words. But I want you to know that even though I said we're talking about sin addiction, right? You can apply these principles to pretty much anything that you feel is like got a stranglehold on your life, anything that's dictating you rather than you dictating it. As the addiction community would say, it's when the tail starts wagging the dog, right? When the thing starts controlling you instead of you controlling it. Oops. So most addictive things, I think, are sin. I couldn't think of a ton of examples that weren't, whether it's positive or a negative thing, whether it's good or bad, because, and I say that typically, we use the thing that we're addicted to in place of God and allowing God's healing, right? We use it as a substitute. We use it to deal with stuff that happens, to cope with it, or to control our lives. However, for some of you, depending on your theology, you may categorize some things that you can be addicted to as sin or not sin. For example, it's not like there's a verse that says, don't cut your arm or something like that. That's something I guess you could technically, some people would argue it's not biblically a sin. Some would say it is. That's completely up to you. But what I am saying is this is something that could still help with that if you're worried about that. Also, another example would be there's a lot of, maybe not at this church, but at my school at least, we had a big, long discussion about is masturbation a sin in every case, right? In every instance, is it a sin? And so we had this big dialogue about that. So just saying, some of you may or may not categorize something as sin and something as not. But if it's controlling your life and it's not something you're in control of, you can use the principles we're going to learn about to apply it to that, all right? So whatever caveats, just know that if you consider it a sin or an addiction, you can apply this to it. Let's see. I also want this to be a really interactive series, so I hope you guys feel free or comfortable to ask questions or to make comments or additions or insights that you have that I missed, things like that. If not, I am going to put this, the lesson stuff online so that you can catch up, because this is kind of like a building thing, right? Everything builds on the thing that happened before it. So if you missed a week, hopefully it'll be posted online so you can kind of catch up or be with where we're going. Other than that, and if I don't know the answer, I'll just say so, and then I'll try and answer it next time. All right, so some common myths about addiction. First, that addiction is only to substances. We kind of talked about that already a little bit.